looked over the archetypes yet, but
Okay. Yeah, no, watch them
there's some
first.
that are very clear.
Yes, because yeah, they're written. You know, there's an author writing them, so that makes them more artificially exaggerated. As
Well,
opposed
even
to,
without the initial background of what are the archetypes, it's very clear like what kind of patterns emerged. And yes, there's someone writing, but
yeah,
it was good to start off with.
yeah, and that's why I say watch them first for fun, and then go back and do the analysis. And we will do that. I'm gonna have us, once you guys have gone through this initially, we're going to, and I don't know if Google Plus lets do it. Might have to go back to Jitsi. Jitsi lets you watch videos together. That's part of what I like about it. But we will watch a video, and then I'll keep pausing it and say, what do you notice? And everybody, I do this to all our volunteers because it gets people thinking critically about what's happening in front of them. And that's going to be really critical for our research. I want you guys to be thinking in a similar pattern of watching all these behaviors in the context of a game and noticing all these variables. And these videos, especially Gamers 2 Darkness Rising, there's so many things going on simultaneously that we can go through it 5 times and look at it from completely different perspectives each time, and I'll be stopping at different parts, the same exact movie. So that one is the richest of them all, I think, for that kind of analysis training and such. But yeah, first watch them through for entertainment. Omar, have you had a chance to watch any of those movies?
No, I have not.
Okay. Now, did I not include links to them? I don't think I did I?
I don't think they're on the training checklist.
Probably should, because that's pretty much mandatory. So,
yeah, I was wondering about that.
Yeah, that's an oversight on my part. I'm going to fix that. Well, okay, I'm not gonna do it right now. I'll make notes to do it when we get. Okay, so add gamers and JQ and other recommended videos to the volunteer training checklist ASAP.
Oh, they're in the recommended entertainment videos.
Oh, they are?
Yeah, the gamers and then like a bunch of other gamers ones.
Oh, but they're not linked. Okay. So
no, they're not.
Links. Okay, add links to. All right, good. That's easier. I just find them. I'll add the links to those, so it makes it a lot easier to just click on those. Good. Okay. So I will do that. So watch for that, Omar, because I reference them all the time. There'll be others I add as well. For example, there's one on autism called Spectrum. It's kind of hard to find. It was through PBS and stuff, but it's really good. It's only about 20-something minutes. And it's a different focus on autism than most other autism. Most autism videos talk about the social issues. This talks about all the perceptive issues, the sensory issues. And it's really beautifully done. It's a really striking video. And it is an important consideration for people on the spectrum, autism spectrum. So
you have the video, but you don't have a link to it.
I will create... Well, I know where to find it, and I'll put a link to it. Yes, okay, I have the video. I have the video, but I also find a link for it. So.
No, I mean it's in the checklist. It's under all volunteers working with any special populations.
Oh, okay. Yes. All right. So I will add that to my. Yes, I will add that. So after this meeting today, I'll hurry and add those links, and then you can refresh the page, and you'll be able to watch those videos. There's some really good ones.
So you do have like everything. It's just there's a lot more to this checklist on the bottom. I honestly hadn't even scrolled past that.
I'm infamous, not famous, infamous for my checklists.
Well, I saw a list of common resources to use, and there's kind of a big space under that, so I just assumed there was nothing else under that.
Yeah. So you can see actually there's a whole section for research assistants. That I'm still working on. You can see I've got video, article, audio. I'm slowly adding the links to that.
To be fair, the half of it is like GM training.
The upper half is, the research assistance is not. So I'm trying to target it better, right? Like right now I'm a little scattered as I'm trying to refine it for different specialists. You guys are the research assistant specialists. But yeah, no, a good chunk of it is GM training because, so the GM training stuff, But the one I would recommend, even though, yeah, that is GM training stuff, so most of that you can skip, except the gamer stuff. I would definitely see, where did I put that under? All Game Master training.
It's list of common resources to use.
Good. Yeah, so that'd be for everybody. So okay, I'll keep cleaning that up. This is kind of you're seeing my horrible process and my ADHD and such, where I kind of just stick everything as I think of it, and then I kind of go through and revise and clean it up, so that way at least I kind of remember everything, but it's kind of painful for others to deal with. So it gets me through life, but it's not always easy for others. So I got to keep refining this and cleaning it up for you. So I'll spend a little time on that after the meeting today to give a bunch more updates for videos and links, so you have more content there. Thank you, Omar, for getting through all of that. Let's see, down under research assistance, so near the bottom. So Pacific Northwest, don't split the party. That's more of, okay, so research and RPGs, primer, and don't split the party. Have you watched any of these? I know it's not complete yet, Omar, but have you seen any of these yet?
Under what are they? I'm sorry?
Under research assistance at the bottom, near the bottom?
No, I literally just watched the 13 videos and Fight's interview.
Okay, that's good. That's good. Hold off on the research assistance one until after today, and then after today, I won't be complete, but I'll get a bunch more under that section specifically for you guys. So I'll try to focus on bringing that up to speed for you. So after today, come back and refresh that page, and I just changed it to numbers instead of bullets, so it's easier to say, okay, what number are you on? And we'll see how that unfolds. And if you guys come across videos that you think would be really relevant for training, or first send it to me, check out, and I can add them to the list if I think they're relevant, because there's lots of great stuff out there. And it can be articles, it can be audio, and it can be video. I prefer articles and video over audio, because you can kind of skip along both in articles and video if you kind of get the idea of things. It's a lot harder to do that with audio. But if it's a really good audio, then great. We'll include that. Okay, where are we at? Okay, 10:32. So let me think of a topic here. Did you guys have any specific topics you would like to cover that you've wanted to cover before I just go doing my thing here for you?
No, go for it.
I am not coming up with anything.
Okay. So between this meeting and the next, if something occurs to you, please write it down and have it handy for specific topics you would like to discuss. It just, that can be helpful sometimes. All right. So going through here. So where are my theory topics? Give it flow state. I wonder how I'm going to organize this. Let's create a theory topics. For discussion. All right, so I've already covered flow state with you guys, right?
Yes.
Okay, good. And I have covered Abaddon interaction patterns.
Yeah.
And I have...
Now just remind me, Abaddon interaction patterns, that was the inter all the different groups.
Yeah, intra-group, intergroup, exactly. Yep, that's Abaddon interaction patterns. You got it. I have... Let's see, what else have we covered? Covered Tuckman's forming, storming, norming, performing.
I know you briefly covered that with me. I don't know if you covered it in this setting.
Have I covered that with you, Omar?
No.
Okay. Well, then that's a good topic. So this is based on Tuckman's theory of small group formation. And I'm going to read the preface from one of my source books here. In 1965, Bruce Tuckman published an article on the developmental sequences in small groups. In the article, Tuckman reviewed the works of a number of researchers who study the developmental stages or phases of small group development. In synthesizing the reviewed researchers' works, Tuckman proposed that groups proceed through 4 general stages of development. So, by the way, that's a good example of what kind of research?
Meta-analysis.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a literature review. What's that?
I said yeah.
Yeah, he did a literature review and then created a meta-analysis, and then he came out with, he then noticed some patterns, and he said from looking at all this literature review, there are typically 4 stages, and he named those stages forming, storming, norming, and performing. So he did not put new groups together. He went through the existing research about that people did on groups and came up with his own theories based on that meta-analysis. And that was 1965, and this has huge impact on psychology, recreation therapy, and businesses, because you work on projects and teams and everything. This is very standard fare for executive training and project management. Most project managers and executives need to know Tuckman's stages. It's pretty common to learn that in the business world. And it was based on meta-analysis. So that's why I say meta-analysis is pretty powerful, because you can discover patterns that you might not otherwise see when you start putting things together. So this is from the book Forming, Storming, Norming, Performing, Successful Communication in Groups and Teams, 3rd edition, by Donald Egolf, PhD, Sandra Chester, PhD. It's through iUniverse, which I think is a self-publishing platform. But it's a good resource. It summarizes things up nicely. It's a good summary. It's not as deep as some other sources, but it's sufficient. So this is their preface. We have found the content in Tuckman's article to be very useful in teaching undergraduates over the years. His synthesis was well-reasoned and comprehensive. In addition, and by the way, a lot of his articles you can just find online easily. In addition, the use of the mnemonic of rhyme and naming the stages was extremely clever. In talking with undergraduates that we have had in our classes over the years, the number who remember and recite the mantra forming, storming, norming, and performing is amazing. We often thought that if we should ever write a book on small group and team communication, we would use Tuckman's rhyme as the lead title for the book. Okay, blah, 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 blah. So let's see, some key parts from this. The short summary is you have forming groups. So when you're first meeting, so this is usually in the context of project management. So I don't know if any of you have worked in tech or the business world, where you bring together a bunch of talented people who have never met each other before, and each have different specialties, and you're assigned a project, and you're supposed to make widget A, and and you have to do it within this timeline and this budget with these 6 people in your group, and then maybe some outsourced resources. And you've never met each other, and there's no clear leadership, or there might be one person who's the project manager, but project managers are more about managing the project necessarily than managing the people. There are project managers who are managers, but a lot of project managers just manage the resource allocation, the timeline, the Gantt charts or waterfalls or whatever. If they're using agile project management, it's different, but they manage the resources and keep a chart and report to the executives, etc. But a lot of project managers are not good team managers. They're just they're better than just a secretary taking notes, although they may do a lot of that. But they kind of tell everybody, well, okay, here we are on the timeline. We have 90 days. We're on day 13. We've spent, $1.3 million so far. And we're, Joe is at 3% of his project. Amy is at 19%, etc. And that's what the project manager kind of just keeps track of all that information, keeps people to try to stay on budget, on schedule, etc. But as far as who the team leader is, sometimes that's clear and sometimes it isn't. Sometimes there is a manager, and it certainly is helpful if there is. But sometimes you're all just thrown at a project like, okay, you 6, go solve this problem, right? Without necessarily saying who's in charge. And so if there isn't clear management, or even if there is, and it's not always the most effective, everybody goes through this initial forming stage where everybody kind of meets each other, and they're kind of, everybody's kind of on their best behavior, and everybody's kind of cautious about what they say, and, you know, yield to other people, and, you know, there may or may not be banter depending upon the work environment. And it can be a little frustrating to get to work because nobody really knows who's doing what. It's kind of like, and the why this applies to role-playing gaming is you experience these dynamics. So forming is when you're first meeting. Storming is where everybody's trying to figure out who does what your roles are, who's in charge, who's not in charge, who you can count on, who you can't count on, or what you can count on to do and not count on them to do. Who's reliable, who's not, who's a flake, who's not, who's combative, who's not, who's passive, etc. So you're all kind of working out that during the storming stage. And the storming stage, especially when you start to get into the crucible of deadlines and pressure, is where the ugliness can come out. That's part of why it's storming. And then people stop being nice to each other. Some people are trying to assert control. So then you have 2 or 3 people trying to take leadership. And so, you know, that can be a challenge. A lot of ugliness can happen. And a lot of projects never get really far past the storming phase. And those are the projects that usually turf. There's no clear leadership, and people aren't really working together as a team. And those projects usually blow the deadlines and the budget and are not successful or create crap. If they can get past the storming phase, you get into norming. That's where people are starting to know what their roles are. So, you know, such and such has become the primary leader, such and such kind of the backup leader. You know, maybe they're a duo, whatever. But the leadership now is kind of becoming clear. Certain people are more reliable for one task than for other tasks, and you start to get a feel for who you can count on for what, and you can start allocating, like, well, this person I know I can count on to get that information out to the public, so I'm going to hand that to that person, because the person who claims to be doing that I can't rely on, but that person who I can't rely on for getting the info to the public actually is pretty good at the analysis stuff, so maybe I'll have them do more of the analysis reports that we take to the executives. And so you start to get that sorted out. And so now you're norming your roles. And then finally, if all goes well, and a lot of groups never get to the stage, but boy, is it wonderful when you do, you get to the performing phase. The performing phase is where now everybody knows their roles they intuit. You barely have to talk to each other. You can just give each other a look. If you're at a meeting and you're talking to some executive about the project or whatever, they're getting an update, and the executive says something, and you just give one of the rest of the group a look, the rest of the group knows what that look means. You haven't said a word, but you know that, you know, there's some internal joke that the group has or something. It just becomes, you've now become kind of a single entity rather than 6 different people. You're working together as greater than the sum of your parts. It's a wonderful place to be. I've been in it a number of times in tech, done these incredible projects that have just, you know, done amazing stuff. And you get this wonderful camaraderie, and you're just a well-oiled machine, is good for a cliche. It's a lot of groups never get there. The groups that do can do really amazing stuff. So that's the performing phase. There's also, Tuckman added later, adjourning, and you have to mispronounce it intentionally to keep the alliteration and rhyming going. So you have forming, storming, norming, performing, adjourning instead of adjourning, so ending the group. So the project is over, everybody gets sent off to other projects or wherever, and you say goodbye. And there's a process to that. Some groups just suddenly end and there's no goodbye. Other groups are like, well, it was great, man, this was awesome. Hey, let's go have a farewell party, whatever. You know, like theater, you'll have a cast party at the end, and there's a ritual and a process to that adjourning to moving on. And then there's reforming. Now you've all been brought back together. Maybe there's a couple of differences in the group. Maybe you're all the same people and you haven't been in touch for 3 years, but now you're all the same people and you're back. There's a little bit of, you kind of go through a short, different version of the forming, storming, norming, performing, but you don't have to go through all of it because you already have prior experience with each other. But if you add a new person, and this can happen anywhere through the project, you add one new person to the project, it can start the whole process all over again, where now you're forming and then you're storming. One person can turn an entire performing group back to storming. One person can completely ruin a group, especially if they're in any kind of leadership role or they think they are. They can break a performing group. There's I think it's Scott's law. I forget whose law it is. It says adding I think it's adding manpower to an already late project only makes it later. Part of that is the onboard process, but also part of it is because it disrupts the group synergy. So just a definition of a small group in this context for this book and for Tuckman. A small group consists of 3 to 9 individuals who have a common goal or purpose. What Avedon interaction pattern is that?
Oh, man.
Working together on a common goal or purpose.
Inter?
It's some sort of inter, isn't it?
Nope.
Then it must be an intra.
Yes, intra-group. Teams are intergroup. So this is describing an intra-group interaction. A small group consisting of 3 to 9 individuals who have a common goal or purpose and who meet and communicate in a given medium for a period of time to achieve that goal or purpose. Does that not describe role-playing gaming, at tabletop at least?
It does.
Yeah. 3 to 9, yeah, that's I mean, 4 to 5 is kind of the sweet spot, but it is pretty typical. And LARPs, it happens too, and you can have it with video games when you're doing, group games and such. But it really describes tabletop. And that number of 3 to 9 is what a lot of the research is based off, though some research has shown an upper limit at around 20 to 25. The number range of 3 to 9 is because the communication is so important. When you start to get to larger groups, it becomes harder to keep. So there's kind of the rule of 5 in management. Are either of you familiar with the rule of 5 in management?
No.
Okay. So you're going to get a lot of my executive training coming out here too. So in management, one of the rules of 5 is that basically nobody can directly, effectively manage more than 5 direct reports. When you get above 5, it starts to break down. Now, that doesn't mean you can't do more. Remember, we talked about memory and chunking. It was typically 7 plus or minus 2. Plus or minus 2 is what most people can chunk in memory. So between 5 to 9 is pretty typical for memory chunking. Well, with management, it's typically around 5, and some people can do more and some people can do less. Some people can't manage at all. But on average, a decent manager can have 5 direct reports and be effective. When you start to get above that, the effectiveness starts to break down. It's not an immediate thing. It's a gradual progression. And this is a really difficult thing at the executive level. So when you're a bottom tier manager and you are in charge of a bunch of people at like a phone bank, a telemarketing phone bank or something, you might have 20 people reporting to you. But you probably will break up, you'll probably set up a few teams under you that you might have a few team leads. So you might be the manager for that floor, but you might say, hey, Phil and Audrey and Mike and Tom, each of you are team leads for these 5 people. And it's something that human beings often just migrate to naturally because it helps keep effective communication. When you start going to larger teams, just think about it. Anytime you get in large groups, you know less and less about those people when it gets larger and larger. When you keep it a smaller knit group of about 5 or so people, it's a lot easier to know what their strengths and weaknesses are and to get to know them in general. When you start getting to the executive level where you have a hierarchy that might be 10 layers deep or more, or Whitehall. Are you guys familiar? Is it White House? Is it Whitehall or White House in the UK? Is it Whitehall, UK? Yeah, Whitehall. So Whitehall is the big administrative government thing, and they have an incredibly deep hierarchy. You start very much, and I bring this up because it comes up in research related to stress and cortisol and health and pecking orders. And when I talk about social interactions and structure, and when you hear me talk about the baboons who turned on each other, from the guy who did 30 years, Robert something or other, 30 years of research on baboons, and how it translates with humans, and how people treat each other and what hierarchies can do to people. Whitehall is often used as an example because it's such a rigid structure. The people high up in the infrastructure have far fewer health issues, and the people at the bottom of the structure have a lot of health issues, a lot of stress issues and such. Anyway, so with your high up in the executive branch, if you have more than 5, let's say you're a VP and you've got 5 direct report directors, that's entire departments, reporting to you, and depending on the size of the company, that could be through the chain of the hierarchy, that could be 1,000 employees under you. You are not able to track that 1,000 employees. That's just humanly, there are not enough hours in the day. So that's why hierarchies start to form, is because of that management. But of course, the deeper the hierarchy, the more you get that, the game telegraph, right? Omar, are you familiar with that? Where people in a circle hold hands and you do hand squeezes in a certain pattern and you try to pass that pattern around. Or there's another version, I forget what it is, where you whisper in somebody's ear and then the next person whispers, the next person whispers. By the time it comes back, it's completely changed what it was. Familiar with those games?
No, I can't say.
Or when you put something through Google Translates and goes through a bunch of different languages and back to English.
Yes.
Yeah, that I get more.
Yeah. So this is all systems level stuff. But so these are games in the West that kids play, but also are used in training exercises to show the error rate of human interaction is quite high. And the more people you go through, the greater the error rate. So you would say something like, you come up with some phrase, because I'm a Tolkien nut, so you might whisper to somebody, "Come not between the Nazgul and his prey." It's something like that. And then the next person might say, "Come not between the Nazgul or he'll play." And then the next person might say, come not to school so we can play. And then the next person, "Can we come to school to play?" And it just gets distorted more and more as it passes from person to person. You're not allowed to ask them to say it again. They only get the one time that they hear it. And so it might come all the way back to, and at the end, it's finally saying, "Come on over to the house to play." And it's completely different than what other than you've got come to this at the beginning, and that's it. And then, let me check this. This is Hawk. And that's spam. Darn it. So you get the idea. And this is where oral storytelling can be a problem. And this is where groups can break down if they get too large. And so having the smaller sizes can be really helpful. Team is a special type of small group, and therefore must meet all the definitional criteria of a small group listed above. The special requirements that make a small group a team are that team members must have complementary skills, they must be accountable for their actions, and they will disband when they have achieved their purpose or goal. And so again, even though we're not doing team sports in a role-playing game, although LARPs and stuff often do have teams, and so the video games, typically tabletop, there's no other team out there. It's just this team. It's this group. It's the role-playing group. That still fits that definition pretty well, doesn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, you come in, you're here, you're from different skill sets, you're accountable for your actions, and you may, if it's a one-shot or a short adventure, you may disband as a group and never see each other again if you're at a convention or a one-shot. Now, where it gets different is with a campaign where you may have the same people going on and on and on, but you typically have within that certain specific goals and adventures that you're going on, and then that ends and you move on to the next thing. So those are kind of like projects. Of course, the term network is an interconnected system of things or people. And of course, you know about systems theory, where there's, they're looking at everything in systems large and small. Now they get into more, some leitmotifs or dominant recurring themes, such as ethos, logos, and pathos, to describe a person, a group, or a message. So ethos refers to the disposition, character, credibility, trustworthiness, or fundamental ethical values peculiar to a specific person, a group, or a message. If a group has a poor reputation and is believed to be unethical, there's a good chance that the group's recommendations will be ignored. The group's recommendations may be ignored even though the recommendations may be valid. Logos refers to the intellectual capacity of a specific person, a group, or the intellectual integrity of a message. A group may be trustworthy and credible, but may not be intellectually qualified to perform a task. For example, a racetrack pit crew is not intellectually qualified to do brain surgery, and a brain surgery team is not intellectually qualified to work on an auto racing team's pit crew. So that's where people talk about being in and out of their field of knowledge and specialty. Pathos refers to the degree of emotional arousal of a specific person, a group, or the emotional appeal of a message. Emotional arousal can fire up a group, as it does in team sports. In almost any group, success leads to very positive emotions like happiness and joy, for example. Negative emotions like sadness and fear, for example, can be debilitating to a group. However, in some cases, these negative emotions can eventually lead to group cohesiveness. And that's where the storming phases come in, where you go through a lot of negativeness, but if you can stick it out, eventually things can get worked out. There's self or intrapersonal communication. And so listening to those descriptions, can you visualize that in the context of a role-playing game pretty easily?
Yes.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, players and groups get reputations. And in fact, in Gamers, they talk about, in Gamers 2, they were trying to recruit new players. And Omar, you haven't seen Gamers 2 yet, right?
No.
Okay, so again, I'll get that updated today so you can get caught up. In Gamers 2, they talk about, apparently we have a reputation. And I'm like, yeah, you make one 9-year-old girl cry and they stop bothering you. Just they have a horrible reputation because they're terrible gamers starting out. So they definitely, and then they definitely have a pathos because look at how they treat each other emotionally and stuff. So, and then you saw the logos, like, and again, I'm going to be referencing the Gamers 2 thing here. The guy who normally always plays fighters decides to play a bard. He's never played a bard before. And so he's like, how different can it be? And it's outside of his sphere of knowledge and expertise. He really doesn't know how to play a bard. And the way he builds his bard, 20 ranks in seduction, is not very well thought out as far as playing an effective bard, which has consequences.
Well, he's an incredibly successful seductress.
Yes, he is. Oh, yeah, 20 ranks of seduction. He is very good at that. That doesn't help the party a whole lot. So, and then, yeah, the pathos in that group is terrible at first, right? And even at the end with the one player, really bad.
Yes.
Yeah. So, yes, Omar, we definitely want to get you watching Gamers 1 and 2 and 3 as soon as possible because I'll be referencing them a lot.
That specific clip you did show in your presentation, okay. So I do know that one.
Good.
The one where the girl decides to be a very intelligent, is it fighter?
Yeah, so it's an intelligent, dexterous, charismatic fighter who is not strong or high constitution. Breaks the stereotype beautifully. I love it.
I always wondered what a bard does in these games. Isn't a bard just a musician?
Well, I mean, so it depends on the version of the bard and the game system, and D&D's been through different incarnations. I love playing a bard. So they often mean bard as a jack of all trades and a performer of some kind. So they might be a public speaker, an actor, a dancer, a musician, singer, what have you. They are most typically associated with the old skalds of Celtic Gaelic lore, who have a lot of knowledge and lore and storytelling and may sing, but also were competent fighters as well. In D&D, the Advanced Dungeons, remember, D&D is the first role-playing game, so everything kind of branches out from there. Since 1974, that's the first one. And in the when they first proposed bards back in the early Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, it was basically the first prestige class, if that means anything to you. Are you familiar with prestige classes in 3rd edition?
No, I've played Dungeons & Dragons once. I usually played Empire.
Right. So in different iterations of D&D, you have a class which is your profession. So you usually start out level 1, you pick a race, and you get the same thing in the video games. And then your class is your profession. In the first version of D&D, in AD&D, the original bard, you couldn't be a bard right away. You first had to be, I think it was a thief and then a fighter, or fighter then a thief, something like that. And you had to get to like 5th level thief, and then you had to get to like 5th level, 9th level fighter, and then you could become a bard. And so you had to be like 15th level before you even could get the bard abilities. And the bard in D&D uses music as part, so their magic is in their music, whether it's singing or instruments. They would often sing their magic, and a lot of their magic is persuasive. So you could make an enemy combatant, fall asleep or not be hostile, or you could, persuade a group of diplomats or whatever to your side, whatever. And also they have buffing, where they might do music and it inspires your own group, so they start hitting better and being harder to hit, and so your magic is tied to your music and such, which is very appealing. I'm kind of a real life bard in a lot of ways, in that I'm also diverse, the jack of all trades approach. Although I've looked it up more recently, and I guess I'm actually more of a Renaissance man because I have a number of specialties, so I'm not just a jack of all trades. But the bard is typically the jack of all trades, where they're really not strong in any one area. They have a really broad range of skills. They're a little bit of everything. They have a little bit of thieving skills. They have a little bit of fighting skills. They have a little bit of magic skills. They sometimes even have some healing skills. So they can kind of do an okay version of every other group in the party, but they don't do it as well. And that's a double-edged sword. What's that?
The red mage, the jack of all trades.
Yeah. And they can struggle. It can be hard to play a bard. Bards often can be the fool, or not. It depends. Some play them better as lore masters than others. And in the Gamers movies, of course, because he built his bard so poorly, he's really not a useful bard. And so that leads to consequences, which I'll let you watch first, because I don't think you've seen that clip. So, yeah.
No, although my experience in role-playing, having a high seduction stat is really useful.
It has its uses, but it is a limited scope.
It depends on if the game master lets you use it for everything.
Seduction may work great when you're in town, but doesn't work very well against an undead horde.
No, that's why they usually leave the seduction person just in town by themselves. They go do stuff.
Exactly. So bards do really well in social situations, but they can struggle in others. But that being said, if your thief is down, they might be able to pick the lock. If you need a little backup muscle, they're going to do better than your wizards are going to do. If you need a little healing, they might be able to do a little bit of healing. So they're kind of a good backup to everybody. They're just not as good as the more focused versions. And a well-built and well-played bard can be a very powerful character and really helpful. Again, especially the social aspect. What's that?
That's a strong theme in competitive video gaming too. I mean, it's just the support. You need a support. It may not seem like you need a support, but you need a support.
Yep.
Yeah, some games you need two supports. Otherwise, you just lose.
It's like you never need to underestimate the value of someone who can help in subtle but important ways.
Yeah, well, buffing, doing all that buffing stuff.
Exactly.
He sounds like just a status mage in like other games, which don't attack directly; they just do stuff to change how the game is.
Yeah, and bards tend to be a little bit more general than that, but yes.
Yeah, it varies. And for example, in more recent versions, they come out with different bard colleges, so they have very different focus. You have your warrior bards who are much more like the Celtic warrior poets. So they're really strong fighters, and they're poets as well, but they're pretty focused. You have the others that are more the healing type. You have the others that are more lore focused. So, there's different specialties within the context. So, and in Hackmaster, for example, they have like half a dozen different cleric types. They really love clerics because nobody wants to play the cleric and only be the healer, so they created all these other cleric types in Hackmaster, which is a derivation of
Clerics are so fun, though.
Is there a bard type character in Vampire? I cannot think of a single one that's the status character, or even a general character.
For what?
For Vampire the Masquerade. They're so specific, all of them.
My goodness.
And there's a lot of classes. They kind of went insane with it.
I'm in the middle of a meeting. Who's this? For RPG Witch? Yeah, what about it? Okay, we have our own development team. We don't need your services. Thank you. Please remove this from your list. Please remove this number from your list. And take care. Bye. All right. So I'm pulling up here because I have Vampire.
I can never remember the names of the classes.
Yeah, so let's see.
Except the ones I play, but other ones I just can never remember their names.
So I got the Masquerade. So are you talking the LARP or the tabletop here? Because
the tabletop.
Oh, the tabletop. Okay, that's not.
I just play Malkavians, so I have no idea what the other characters do.
So like I got Requiem here. Let's see. We've got. I mean, it's a little bit of a tangent, but to answer your question, of course they don't have a very good index or anything. Let's see.
No, they have so many classes.
Yeah. Let's see. Character 88. We've got a pretty good, Eric, if you're ever into it, there's a good vampire group over in Post Falls that meets on Sundays. If you ever want to try it. Most vampire groups are pretty scary, but...
Wait, why?
A lot of them devolve very quickly. People start taking... If you don't have good... Oh, that's a good topic we got to talk about at some point. Bleed. Let me put that on my list. If you have a bad problem with inappropriate bleed between real world and game world, in character and out of character, and that's the problem with Vampire, especially the LARP version, the bleed issues can be really toxic. So a lot of Vampire groups are notorious for ruining relationships, ruining friendships. They're infamous for it. It's unfortunate. Yeah, unfortunately, their table context and index is basically useless. That's a big pet peeve of mine, is role-playing games that have crappy index and table of context. I really hate those.
They do have a seductress character. That's the same.
They do indeed. I forgot how bad their index and stuff was. Anyway, getting a bit tangential here, but... so maybe next week remind me to talk about bleed. I'm writing it on the webpage here for the checklist, but that's a very important topic that has consequences in all formats of role-playing. And it can be used to benefit, or it can be a very bad thing. Interpersonal communication is communication in the two-person, usually face-to-face setting. Common interpersonal pairings are parent-child, best friends, spouses, colleagues, subordinate, superior, and so on. Small group communication is communication among 3 to 9 individuals. Something very dramatic happens when the number of interactants increases from 2 to 3. First, coalitions can form. 2 individuals can form a coalition against the third. This is the 2 against 1 phenomenon. At least 3 people are needed for this phenomenon to occur. With just 2 individuals, no coalitions can form. Coalitions, even in the 3-person group, can and do change. At one point, persons A and B can form a coalition against C, but later persons B and C can form a coalition against person A. This tendency to form coalitions is a key dynamic characteristic of small groups. And you've seen this in gaming, right? In whether they came in as a couple or something, or a couple of friends who are already, buds. We've talked about the power duo and stuff like that, where they have kind of us against them attitude. Or whether you just see some people partner up with others and, other people disagreeing with the premise of others, and that can be fluid. It can change. Where people might be against the thief when they're in town and the thief is going around pickpocketing everybody and getting the cops all chasing them. But then when they're underground and they need someone to disarm the traps and the locks and open the treasure chest, all of a sudden they might be very supportive of the thief. It's very situational. Also, when the number changes from 2 to 3, there's a basic change in communication behavior. So when person A is talking to person B in the presence of person C, it is no longer interpersonal communication because there's now 3 people. Characteristic 2 of a small group is that the group is small enough that every member has the opportunity to participate. This is a critical thing in recreation therapy and in our programs, is making sure everybody gets to participate as equally as possible. With the addition of each new member, participation opportunities decrease. This is why the upper limit for small groups is usually set at 9. When group size exceeds this number, the group tends to break into smaller groups. Little side discussions begin, and a single group focus becomes tenuous. Moreover, the group tends to take on the characteristics of public communication. And as I said, with my research in role-playing gaming, 4 to 5 players, so you have GM plus 4 to 5 players, is kind of the sweet spot, where you've got enough diversity there to do some really great stuff, but the game flow is still pretty quick. When you start to hit 6 players, it really starts to slow down almost exponentially, it seems like. By the time you're at 8 players, gameplay can be really slow. So that 4 to 5 it holds up again and again and again. Now, there are facilitation techniques to speed up the process for larger groups, but you usually have to sacrifice some of the free form and a little bit of the role playing in order to do that. I usually use egg timers and stuff like that to speed it up. With the computer-based gaming, you can have pretty large groups, but again, you're often going to still break off into little smaller units and such. You look at the military, and typically they have units of 4 to 5 in their units for special forces teams, etc. And you see that happen a lot with the online games where you have the guilds and people still break down into their little smaller units. You might have a huge guild on a raid of 100, 200, whatever more people, but often they're a loose association of many of these groups, right? That was a question at the end for your...
Oh.
It sounded rhetorical, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yes.
Do you have any comments or thoughts on that?
No, I mean, I experienced that, of course, in a computer-based setting.
Mm-hmm.
Things like World of Warcraft with
Yep.
raid groups and things like of that nature.
Mm-hmm.
But...
And have you guys seen, and this is also I need to add if I didn't already, The Guild by Felicia Day series?
No.
No.
Okay, and Omar, you especially, because it's basically about World of Warcraft. They just call it The Game. Mm-hmm. But it's basically a group of people. It's a comedy. It was originally self-funded and then community-funded, and then Microsoft sponsored them by their 3rd season. And they have 5 seasons. Felicia Day kind of built up her own little internet empire there for quite a while. Became fairly famous in geek culture. So I'll add that to the list of viewing. it gets better quality, but a little less funny as it progresses. And it's also kind of helped reboot Will Wheaton's career as well. She kind of came to the rise because of Joss Whedon. Are you familiar with Joss Whedon?
Yes.
Okay, so she was in Buffy the Vampire Slayer towards the end. She was this redheaded Slayer that came in, and then
So the crappier seasons.
yeah, oh yeah. No, in fact, I've kind of joked that she's the death knell of a lot of sci-fi series. Like by the time they cast her, the series is doomed. I don't think she causes it. I just think by the time they get to her, because she's always struggled as an actress to get. She always gets the quirky, nerdy type roles, and just has struggled with getting steady work as an actress. And so then in 2006, well, prior to 2006, somewhere in the 2000s, she was really depressed about her acting. Well, let me back up a little bit. Or did I already talk about her previously, about Felicia Day?
You talked to it about with me. I don't think you did with Eric.
What's that, Eric?
Not with me.
All right, so a little bit of trivia about her, just because she's a notable person in geek culture and gaming culture. She's had quite an influence. She was, for the most part, homeschooled by her mother. Very bright. She was a child prodigy violin player. She graduated high school, I believe, at 16, and graduated with her bachelor's as a double major in math and music. Those are both really tough majors. And she had a double major in math and music with a bachelor's at 19. She graduated as valedictorian out of Texas. So very bright person there. But she also jokes about in her show about what happens to a child prodigy once they grow up. They're not special anymore, right? There's consequences to getting older. But anyway, so she went into the acting career and struggled with that. Would get bit roles here and there. She's been in movies and TV shows, and she'd pop up here and there, but always struggling to get steady work. So then fast forward to about 2006, there was the big Hollywood writers' strike. And so there wasn't any writing going on for, at least for the large lion's share. And while that was going on, Joss Whedon decided to do an independent bit called Dr. Horrible's Sing-Along Blog.
Yup.
Have you seen that, Omar?
Yeah.
Okay. And she is Penny. Felicia Day was Penny in there. Do you recall? She was the female love interest of Dr. Horrible.
Well, that's the only thing I do know her from, because I do not remember her in Buffy, but I don't remember the later seasons.
She was only in like the last episode of the second to last season, and then I think the time travel episodes, and then like the last episode of the last two seasons. I think she was in both of those or something like that. She was just in the time travel episodes of the grim future. But anyway, so fast forward. So he had her cast as Penny in Dr. Horrible's Sing-Along Blog. And, of course, she had the music background and everything. And so that kind of brought her into the spotlight of the internet. And that was the first real web series, like where he just released it for free and over the web. And this is all during the writer's strike. And it really helped get her career, at least in the internet space, launched. So then she created, well... Also, somewhere prior to this time, she got it hooked on, in her own words, World of Warcraft. She did nothing but, for about like a year or two, she was a self-described video game addict to World of Warcraft. She didn't bathe, she didn't talk to friends, she didn't look for work, she didn't pay her bills, she did not take care of herself at all. She was just obsessed with this game. Now, what the real factor was she was in depression and withdrawal, and the World of Warcraft was giving her an outlet for that. But that was how she was, that was where she was putting all her energy, was into World of Warcraft. And so she learned all that cultural stuff of that whole online gaming experience very intensely from that couple of year period. Finally, she realized she needed to snap out of it, so she started writing about her experiences. Well, eventually, fast forward, she decided to turn that into a web series, And so that started as the Guild. And so she and some friends got together and filmed the first season together. It's very rough, but, you know, it was a self-shot thing. And then after that, the next year they got funding from fans because it was a hit. So the second season they got fan funding, and by the third season they were sponsored by Microsoft for third, fourth, and fifth season. And you can get the DVDs on Amazon. You can watch them online, and they're entertaining. It's also rebooted Will Wheaton. I don't know, are you familiar with? I think we've had this conversation before, but Will Wheaton was Wesley Crusher on Star Trek, and then he was also in Stand By Me, the movie. But he basically, after Star Trek, just disappeared until this show, The Guild, and then Big Bang Theory. And it kind of rebooted him as a completely different person because everybody just associated him with Will Wheaton after Star Trek Next Generation. But with The Guild, he's an a-hole. He's a total jerk. He is a jerk and had a lot of fun playing a jerk. And that's kind of the role he came on with in Big Bang Theory as well. And then since then, he then later, through her, launched the Tabletop web series, which is where he would show a new game with some celebrities, do a board game or whatever. And it started to create, and I think I talked to you, Omar, about that, the Whedon effect, which relates to the Slashdot effect. So Slashdot.org was a website in the late 90s, early 2000s, still around. News for nerds, stuff that matters. It was a very techie website during the boom years of the dot-com boom. And you'd have a Slashdot effect. If somebody placed an article, if it got front page on Slashdot, your website probably would go down because you would get so much traffic from people clicking the link, your servers would be overloaded. This is the early days of the web. Not the internet, but the web. And so that was the Slashdot effect. Well, Whedon created his own effect. I mean, he didn't self-title, it's just what it became, where if he reviewed a board game, and originally he went to Felicia Day wanting to do role-playing games. Actually, no, she went to Will Wheaton wanting him to do role-playing games as a series. He thought people would be bored with that, so suggested board games. Excuse me. So they did the board game thing, and when he would feature a board game, all the stores would get cleaned out immediately because people would go and buy all the game. And so eventually, after a year or two, stores started to prepare for the Whedon effect. But when they knew what was the upcoming game, they would order extra inventory in advance to prepare for the onslaught of sales. So he created this huge sales spike with his little show, which was part of Felicia Day's empire that was Geek and Sundry. Now, a few years ago, she sold Geek and Sundry off to some other people, and it's kind of floundered since then. And I think she had a non-compete or something because she kind of disappeared for a while. And then just this past year, she just went ahead and had a kid. and she's been just kind of rebooting her vlog just in the last few months, slowly coming back online and such. But she and Will Wheaton are close friends and communicate all the time, etc. But as far as more pegs and video game culture along those lines, and specifically Warcraft, she's a very popular and public representation, and again in a comedic way. And I wrote an article critical of what she did. It was both of her and of Big Bang Theory some years ago, which was the quit inculcating the stereotypes, knock it off. You can write funny, entertaining stories without having to further the negative stereotypes about gamers. And I actually got a response from Kim Ivey, I think her name was, who was the producer and friend of Felicia Day, being pretty defensive about my comments. So I think the article's on the WWW2 website. I don't think it's on the new one yet, because that's all blog stuff I got to move. But let's see, knock it off. Yeah, if you go to WWW2 and just type in "knock it off," it's 3 words. Knock it off shows and writers still perpetuating negative RPG gamer stereotypes even in webisodes. So I was intentionally controversial in my headline because that helps get, readers.
Clickbait.
What's that?
Clickbait.
Well, but at least it's not, there's no ads or anything. So it was triggered because Mike Rugnetta on the PBS Idea channel, who mentions RPG research at the end, He made the comment, and I totally agree with him, said to the writers of Big Bang Theory that keep perpetuating all the negative stereotypes about role-playing gamers, knock it off. So I was quoting him. So a challenge to writers. So I wanted to challenge writers to try something different, and enjoy, do comedy and all this without it having to perpetuate these stereotypes. And so I included Big Bang Theory and the Guild in this, and because the characters in there in the Guild are highly dysfunctional, really, really dysfunctional, and it's entertaining. It's totally entertaining. But so then Kim Evie is it? She replied in November 2012, defending that. So, and about how comedy world, nobody gets portrayed as well-adjusted, happy, healthy, contributing members of society, because that was a phrase I used and stuff. So it was kind of interesting to get that response. I was quite surprised, actually. Probably didn't help my chances of making contact with Felicia Day with my article, but...
Oh, you're the guy who wrote that grumpy article. Yeah, I remember.
Don't talk.
Well, I mean, she has to know it's true. I mean, she can't. She must have seen Big Bang Theory. Especially as a woman, she must be really offended.
I don't know. But so anyway, so small group communication, then public communication. There's usually one speaker and a group of listeners. A student giving a speech in a public speaking class is engaging in public communication. Other examples would be citizen addressing a town hall meeting, or a politician giving a stump speech. In public communication, the interaction among participants is dramatically reduced in comparison with small group communication. Aside from a question and answer session at the end of the presentation, the audience for the most part is passive. Then there's mass communication, which is even less real-time interaction afforded. In mass communication, one communication agent sends a message to a mass audience which has no opportunity to interact with the sending agent in real time. Mass communication messages are mediated electronically or by print, and many of these mediated messages are prepared well in advance of the presentation. Examples include newspapers, magazines, TV shows, etc. In these cases, interaction with audience members in real time is virtually impossible. Although I've done it with our show, for these reasons, mass communication audiences, particularly TV audiences, have been described as passive and non-interactive. So it can be seen from above that the small group allows certain interaction dynamics to occur that do not occur at the interpersonal level. It is at the small group level that maximum opportunities for participation among group members can occur. When the number of participants exceeds 9, those opportunities decrease, and the group can then take on the appearance of a collection of smaller subgroups or a public communication situation. And I was just mentioning how with our Twitch show, we let the audience communicate with us in the chat room real time, and even potentially cause interaction in the game by spending hero points and making events happen. But it's still, it's not full interaction, but it's a way to mix it. And Zombie Orpheus Entertainment, what they're doing with the Fantasy.network, of course, they're trying to make so the movies, the directors, the producers, the actors, and the audience can interact with each other about the show. Now, obviously, it's not real time, except when they do their One Trick Pony and Gamers Live. They'll do live improv with the audience helping shape what they do. But again, that's done in the improv style, like you can't take it with you. No, not you. Whose line is it anyway? Sorry, whose line is it anyway? They kind of do those kind of techniques, but in the context of role-playing gaming. But you get the point as far as the small group has a certain level of effectiveness. And again, 9 would be a really big tabletop role-playing gaming group. 4 to 5 to 6 is really, you don't really want to go much higher than that. Let's see. Here's a little interesting on the importance of studying small group and team communication, especially with different groups. So a lot of people have a tendency to see group activity as purely task activity and devoid of psychodynamics. That's definitely not the case. In group participation, group members receive feedback that tells them who they are, how valuable, cherished, and competent they are, and what role has been made available for them to fill. The sociologist Irving Goffman has said, doing is being, meaning that one's being or sense of self is determined by what one does. Serving in a group is doing, and such service therefore contributes to one's being or sense of self. A person who loses their job, for example, because of downsizing, mergers, takeovers, and so on, is understandably devastated by the loss. First, of course, is the loss of income, but sometimes almost equally devastating is the attendant loss of self. The person has no answer to the question of, what do you do? Friends and family groups provide critical feedback that helps to sustain a positive self-concept, but for most adults, this is not enough. We want to feel valuable in outside groups, outside our friends and family. The premier outside group is the employment group. No group member is a robotic task worker, but instead is a worker with socio-emotional and psychological needs. The study of small group and team communication will help, therefore, in the understanding and the satisfaction of these needs. And so then bringing in Erickson's proposed model of development, which you guys both should be familiar with to some degree from birth to death, Erickson's model is relevant to groups and self-concept because at each stage of development, Erickson says there's an individual or group that has a significant impact on development and self-concept. Erickson's 8 stages and the respective significant individual or group is as follows. 1, birth through first year, the mother is the significant person, and significant persons in caps. 2, through the second year, the father can become the significant person. Now again, not all of Erickson's stuff is fully agreed with, but that's their premise in this kind of context. 3, third year through 5th year, the family is the significant group. 6th year till onset of puberty, the neighbor and school provide significant other groups. 5, adolescence, peer groups become significant. 6, early adulthood, friends, intimates, and workmates are the significant others. 7, middle adulthood, the shared household provides the significant other and core. And 8, late adulthood, family is important, but people often see humanity as being significant as they like to come to the conclusion that their lives have made a difference. And noted in Erickson's model is a significant other or a group of significant others for each developmental stage. In the beginning of life, anyway, we got the summary there. But in the study of small groups and teams, there are 2 paradoxes that come to light. Paradox 1, stated by Robert Bales, is when attention is given to the task, strains are created in the social and emotional relations of the members of the group, and attention then turns to the solution of these problems. So long as the group devotes its activity simply to social emotional activity, however, the task itself is not getting done, and attention would be expected to turn again to the task areas. So think about that in the context of role-playing gaming. What would be some examples? Do you want me to reread that for you?
So that would be like flopping back and forth between the game and the metagame, right?
That's one potentially, although you could do it without going meta. You could have all of the debate in the party staying in character and debate what to do. So let's say we need to open this door, and everybody's debating how to open the door, and then somebody says, well, you're always being bossy. Well, that's because I'm the most competent at it. And then they start arguing about the dynamics of the group while they're still standing in front of the door, not opening the door. And they need to resolve the dynamics of the group first while the task is not getting done of opening the door.
Right. I always play, there always seems to be that thinker in the group who's like, I've got the highest intelligence, so let's look at this door 20 different ways before we open it.
Well, and that's analysis paralysis.
Yeah.
You, from engineering, you know that term, I assume.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. It is a dangerous, dangerous thing. What's that, Omar?
No, I'm just trying to think. I don't really ever play games with people who are like that. The worst I see is the archetype you said last week, which was the person who sticks too much to the rules.
Okay.
So instead of going to the door, he will say, well, I'm not sure exactly how to do this thing or how to roll, and then we will spend 15 minutes waiting for him to decide.
Okay. Have you not...
And then we will start arguing, being just like, who cares? Move on.
So because you're mostly online role-playing games, right? When you do role-playing games mostly.
No, this was tabletop.
Oh, this was tabletop. Oh, okay.
Yes. Online, I don't really play with people. I usually play with one or two other people at most.
Oh, okay. Okay. Because that's a different thing. Because you'll run into it even... but video games tend to be faster paced, so the instances happen a lot faster. You have to kind of really stop and go, oh yeah, that kind of happened, though it happened in like 15 seconds instead of 15 minutes.
Yeah.
So yeah, which
my
is...
experience is usually it's not a role-playing aspect that people get hung up, but
logistics
or mechanic aspect.
Yeah, it's usually tactical or logistical or overall strategy.
Right. We die, and then we discuss, usually, and that discussion can usually go back and forth between the same point being said in two different ways. So,
right.
But it does hang up the group, and it distracts from...
Right, so let's say, let's say your raiding party gets killed by a boss because you guys didn't coordinate well. So now you're getting ready to go on that boss again, and now you're going, guys, let's not get killed. And somebody else says, well, who made you the boss of us? You know, we can do what we want. They're like, well, no, man, if we go in and we're not prepared, we're just going to get plastered again. We're going to keep getting fragged. Let's work this out. And you're like, well, you don't need to, and so you have to work out those social issues to get effective again and get back on the actual task.
Or even in there, it kind of factions off, like they were talking about so your healers will say, well, this is a tanking issue. And your tanks will say, well, this is a damage issue. And your damage says, well, this is a healing issue.
Exactly. And meanwhile, the task is not getting done.
Well, you see that one person who's blaming everyone, but it's very obviously him that's the issue.
Yes,
you just like,
yeah.
Do you not have eyes? Do you not see what you're doing? I just come across.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, no, online I see that, especially because I play League of Legends a lot, and it's a very team-based game.
Mm-hmm.
Same.
That everyone has to know what they're doing, and you will always get that one person who's like suiciding over and over again, and they're like, I don't know what's going wrong. It's like, maybe stop walking to the enemy and just do nothing and die.
Yes.
There is definitely an issue with people agreeing on what the issue is in the first place.
Yes.
Because everyone has an idea or thinks they know what it is, and it could be something completely different.
Or everyone could be missing the issue.
Yep.
True. Or the other team could just be better than you. That's just the thing.
That's true.
Yeah, because sometimes you're just worse than the other people, and
Part of
it is what it is.
But stats aside, part of it is they may be in the performing stage and you're stuck in the storming stage.
Yeah, and you see that especially with League of Legends, where there's a team, and you guys will be doing fine, but they're just clearly more on top of it than you. It's like everyone is just in sync, and you're like, wow.
You got it.
Or because that game is usually random people playing, you'll get like two people playing together in the other team who are on communications, who know exactly what they're doing, communicating really well. As opposed to just strangers when you're just doing stuff and hoping that a random person will know what you're doing.
Exactly, and that's part of that forming phase there too.
Yeah.
Yep.
I guess I come from a different perspective for tabletop because we've only played tabletop games together.
Okay.
So none of us have pretenses or any like ideas of what it's supposed to be like. We just made it what we want it to be.
Right, but any group, this applies to any group. You guys probably early on went through these phases before you got them sorted out.
Yes, definitely. Not through tabletop gaming, but through other means of gaming.
Sure.
So by the time we reach tabletop, it just works.
Yeah, because you already worked out the group dynamics, even though you changed the medium.
Exactly.
That's all it changed was the medium. And so, but the group had already worked out most of its dynamics. So
do you see more disarray happening when the group is people who don't know each other, or is it the same even if they were friends before they started playing?
Oh, no, definitely when they don't know each other. Definitely.
Okay.
If you have prior history that's positive, then no. I mean, again, you'll have more factionalizing, but prior knowledge of each other will usually expedite the process. That being said, I have seen some interesting situations where, and again, it's a luck of the draw. You get a bunch of experienced gamers together who don't have a bunch of big egos and are there to play the game in a very cooperative, not competitive way. This is rare that this happens in a pickup game, but I have seen it. And those groups, because they're already experienced gamers, so everybody knows how to play the system well, and everybody knows how to role play well, and you've got a good GM, and they fly through. They don't have to figure out. Everybody's like, okay, they state very clearly, I like to play the healer. I like to be the backup. I like to do a little bit of fighting. That's where I fit in the role here. So they define very early on their norming. So they get through forming, storming, norming like in minutes. And so they're in the norming phase early on, and this group can be performing within an hour. It's rare, but I've seen it happen from time to time, and it's great when it happens, because then everybody's in high immersion, and you're more likely to get in flow state, which is the bliss state. But it's rare. Most of the time when I see pickup games and a bunch of strangers, you got a lot of egos and different people trying to take charge, and everybody has a better way, their better way of how to approach the situation, whether strategically or tactically, or you have multiple tactical people with just very different approaches. And it just flounders, and you're stuck forever in the forming, storming phase. That's my experience of most most pickup games, and that's why I don't really care for them. I really don't. John runs pugs every week, all the time. He loves them. He likes his scripted game and pugs and organized play, and I do not care for it. I like free-form, ongoing campaigns with the same people for a long period of time. I find that the most rewarding. But that's the beauty of this. It's a very flexible hobby that can meet a lot of different needs for a lot of different people.
About the research, game companies definitely know that the dynamic is better when people know each other, because they tend to punish groups that play together a bit by making them play against more experienced players, because they know that they will work better together than just randoms.
Well, they want to make sure it's all about engagement. They want to maximize the hours that you're spending. Whoa, that's a different ringtone. Which phone is that? Let me check this. This is on one of the business phones. Thank you for calling RPG. No. Give me a minute. I need to answer this. Thank you for calling RPG Therapeutics. This is Hawk. How may I help you?